Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Therein lies the challenge that is facing House Republicans right now as they try to find a path forward on budget reconciliation to achieve the legislative objectives of President Trump, which includes steep tax cuts, making permanent his 2017 tax cuts, specifically energy and border policy, which they're trying in the House to roll all into one bill. And we got the budget outline yesterday.
That's right.
It seems things are changing, though, as they mark things up, with the budget chair, Jody Arrington, now saying if they can't reach $2 trillion in tax cuts, the maximum allowed, or in spending cuts rather, the maximum allowed in tax cuts would be $4 trillion. The problem is just renewing the 2017 tax cuts is expected to cost a bit more than that.
So the math is difficult here, and that's where Congressman Ralph Norman comes in. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to bring in a member of the aforementioned House Budget Committee representing South Carolina's 5th District with his own point of view here. And we're told, Congressman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio, that you're one of 2 potential no's with the numbers that we're hearing. So we'll update that. Let's say it's at least $2 trillion in spending cuts, $4.5 trillion cap on tax cuts, a $4 trillion extension of the debt limit. Would you vote yes on a bill like that?
Well, first of all, what we started out with was we could not continue the path of unsustained spending. Spending is a problem for inflation. Inflation is not income, it's spending. The base budget I voted to get out of committee. We had the timeline to meet, which is today, for the markup, which we're doing. To be honest, I'm confident that we're going to have the amendments in place that will get the job done. And as you mentioned, we've got $1.5 trillion in baseline number with an aspiration of 2. The tax cuts, $4 trillion, 4.5, and then with $300 billion for defense and homeland security. And I think we're going to get there. I think it's important for us to get our own version out. I know the Senate is working on one, but all the House is responsible for the purse strings. So I'm confident we'll get it out. It's going to be a long day, but we expected that. A lot of amendments, a lot of Democrat amendments, and we'll have our own that I'm confident will add to the value.
Well, obviously, Congressman, getting it out of committee is one hurdle, but getting a package that can actually pass on the House floor with what is assumed to be 0 Democratic votes is another thing entirely. With this structure, are you confident the requisite votes would be there?
Here's what I'm confident of. When it goes to the floor, there will be a total explanation of every cut every committee comes up with and where it's coming from. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be. But every dollar in Congress that's spent has got an advocate for it, and they're coming out in full force as I speak to you right now, Kailey. But yeah, I'm confident, and I'm confident because of this. It will make sense. Everybody agrees that we can't continue the path. But I'll tell you what's got to happen. President Trump, who's got a 65, 69% approval rating, is going to have to get involved. Anybody that at the end of the day, when he goes to the floor that doesn't agree with it or has issues, I think he will directly get involved, as he has, and he's done a brilliant job of doing that and explaining why the tax cuts, we've got to get this out because it's going to be a tax increase for over 28 to 35% for all Americans. We can't let that happen. The prosperity that happened under his reign, we got to continue, and I think at the end of the day, I think we'll pass it.
Well, we know, Congressman, that President Trump is not above picking up the phone when it's time to weigh in on things, as I'm sure we all recall from the most recent speaker's vote. Are you hungry for the president to weigh in here?
Absolutely. He's got to weigh in because we can't afford to stumble on this. I mean, it's interesting. Every politician, every 535 members of Congress campaign on conservatism, cutting the deficit. We know it's not sustainable. Now, when it actually comes down to it, that's where he comes into the picture. And does it make sense to put work requirements on Medicaid? I think it does. Does it make sense to to go down the line and let block grants, let states handle some of that funding? It's not a cut in Medicaid as one example. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to have to get involved, and he will, to pass what he considers. This is a linchpin for his whole 4 years in office. It's great to start it now. Look what he's done on the DOJ Commission, and so I'm anxious, and I think it's going to pass, and I'm optimistic.
Well, and with this structure, you already mentioned potential cuts to Medicaid here, but essentially what this structure will mean is that if the cost of Trump's tax cuts go higher, if we're adding on things like no tax on tips or overtime or Social Security, lifting the SALT cap, perhaps more spending cuts have to come into place. So what else is going to have to go on the chopping block if Donald Trump, the president, is to get everything he wants here?
Well, first of all, it's not cuts to Medicaid. We're not doing that. Is it a reallocation? Yes. Is it getting people off the rolls that are healthy? Yes. Is it, and that's what he can sell to anybody who is feeling a lot of pressure, which I understand. And you got to consider the growth rate. I think we got a 2.5% growth in the economy of GDP. I think that'll happen. That'll make some of the difference up. But it's not going to be easy, but it never is. But I think we'll get there. And the alternative of letting the tax cuts expire and give Americans that kind of a tax increase is not a pretty picture. And we're not going to let that happen.
I'm wondering where you are on the timeline here, Congressman, and just how much time there is to work all of this out. We've got a funding deadline 29 days out. Would you support a continuing resolution to keep the lights on if negotiations were moving in the right direction?
Yeah, and I don't like CRs. I think it needs to be a kind of a modified CR. As example, the ones that get hit the most are the military. I think Pete Hegseth will weigh in on what he needs. I think Tom Homan will weigh in with what he needs. But yeah, I would vote for a CR depending on what the final conditions are as part of it. But you've got to allow the continuation of what particularly the military is doing. And every contract, every lease extension is affected by a CR in a negative way. We will have to do some carve-outs, and they will have to tell us what they need. We finally got people in office that they know it. Pete Hegseth knows the military. He knows where the money ought to go. Same thing with Tom Homan. He's got this deportation down. But the agencies, at the end of the day, the appropriations are going to have to come up with the money, and that's where Donald Trump comes in to make the case. And I think there's no one better that can do it, that can present the case than he can.
Do Democrats come in somewhere, Congressman, on this when we're talking about just keeping the government funded beyond March specifically?
They don't come into the solution. I mean, we're not going to have to deal with them, hopefully. I mean, some of the things that we've heard they're going to ask for, like the elimination of Elon Musk, like the end to deportation, it's ludicrous. People are excited about what Elon Musk is doing, and if you have to deal with them, it's just two different universes with them today. And look at the demonstrations they've done against what Elon Musk is doing. He's not getting paid. He's an investigator. He's supplying the numbers that we should have had years ago. So, no, I don't think we'll have to deal with them, and I don't think we'll need their vote. At the end of the day, they're not going to vote with us. When you watch the hearings in the Budget Committee, I don't think any of them are going to vote for this budget. And we've got a good budget, and I think we'll pass it.
Realizing you support the spirit of Elon Musk's mission here, Congressman, as a lawmaker in the House of Representatives, do you worry when we talk about Xing out entire agencies without the approval of Congress?
Absolutely not. Let the money flow, which has never been discovered. People are asking me, why didn't Congress discover these abuses of where our money goes? The reason is we couldn't get to it. He's the only one that had the brain power and the bandwidth to get to follow the checks to where they actually ended up.
Sure. The money's one thing, though, but the actual existence of the agency, just if they blow them out, you don't think Congress should have a say in that?
I think at the end of the day, we'll have to vote on it. But through his executive powers and through the Constitution, he can cut the funding off, which he's doing. And if let's say an agency that has some good parts in it, President Trump will recognize those that need to be continued, but it's the money is where it all ends up, showing whether a agency should continue. It shouldn't go overseas. It shouldn't go for Sesame Street books for the tune of $20 million. It shouldn't go on to $16 million to Vietnam for inclusion. Things like that, we the people are going to weigh in on, and they already have. But some agencies will need to be modified. Some agencies will need to be scaled down. Department of Education is one of them. Social Security is another one. When you find out, from what I'm hearing, people are getting 4 and 5 checks, he's investigating all that. And let the American people decide. It's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money.
All right. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us live today from Capitol Hill. That's Republican Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, of course, member of the House Budget Committee, as that markup is still underway.